Yo, it's Grego, and recently I've been playing a little something called video games. Castlevania Symphony of the Night and Super Metroid to be more specific, and I've come to the realization that I really enjoy Metroidvanias. I just bought Dread, and I'm considering giving that new Castlevania Advance collection a shot. So with this new addiction, and seeing how I've just played what I've heard many say is the best out of the Metroid and Castlevania series, I thought I'd give my 2 cents on the genre and which of the 2 games I prefer. All the while I'll be modeling Samus from Super Metroid in a low poly N64 style. I mean, hey, I gotta stay on brand somehow. Also, I didn't record any game footage since I played both of these games on console, so if I really need to show gameplay footage, I'll be sure to credit creators down below. Now I'll be honest, I was always kind of intimidated by Metroidvanias. I don't know why, but every time I started one, it always gave this vibe of delving into the unknown. I mean, let's be real, most games you start, you don't always know how much of a time dump they're gonna be. But with Metroidvanias, the lines were always a bit more blurred. Let's say you're playing a linear game. There's a clear beginning and end to each level, and you'll most likely stop playing at the end of a level rather than the beginning. Even with open world games, most of their sequences are in the form of missions, with a clear beginning and end. And I imagine you're not going to turn off GTA while you're in the middle of a bank heist. In my experience with Metroidvanias, and remember, I've only played 2 so far, the only times I felt were a good time to stop was after boss fights, but most of the time I didn't even know I was going to encounter a boss until a room or 2 before, sometimes never even getting an indication that a boss was coming up until I was in the room with them. Surprisingly enough, however, this is what turned what was supposed to be an hour-long session of playtime to me losing hours of sleep. So many times I'd tell myself, after I beat a boss, save and hop off the game, but instead I continued to the next room to see what was to come, or travel to the other side of the map to enter an area that was originally unavailable to me. But now that I have this grappling hook, or now that I can turn into fog, I can finally satisfy the curiosity that I've had since early on in the game. To make another comparison, once you're done with a level or a mission in most games, you return to some type of overworld or stage select, but not with Metroidvanias. Once you beat a boss, you refill your health and either travel back to a save room to record your progress, or go to the next room and continue your progress. There's little to no padding in between. Much like there's little to no padding with the differing playstyles. I wouldn't say I'm the most skilled gamer. My policy for boss fights tends to be run in head first and pray I kill them before they kill me. Sometimes it works, and sometimes I die enough to the point where the gears in my head start working and I actually try to learn and adapt to attack patterns. The best thing about Metroidvania is that depending on your playstyle, you don't have to use your brain as much. You just have to explore. A lot. You see, Metroidvanias don't expect you to fully explore their map. In fact, you can beat Symphony of the Night and still play through less than 50% of the game, granted you get the bad ending because of it. It's through exploration that one is able to stock up on upgrades, or XP, to help tank more hits or deal more damage. Me being the overly curious player that I am, and definitely not because I would get stuck so many times I'd backtrack constantly hitting walls or bombing floors for an ounce of progress, I'd find myself relatively stacked when certain boss fights would come up. Now this doesn't mean encounters would end in a matter of seconds, but I definitely had enough wiggle room that critical thinking was less of a requirement. For example, when it came time to fight Ridley in Super Metroid, I had so much health and missiles that I was able to kill him on my first try. I was so shocked at this encounter that I thought this was some mini-boss and there was a more serious Ridley boss fight to come. Needless to say, I was a bit underwhelmed when I realized that wasn't the case. But don't get it twisted, there were still some bosses that fucked me up. I felt this playstyle was exemplified more in Symphony of the Night thanks to its RPG elements, and since my goal was to discover every inch of the castle, I never found myself going out of my way to grind for XP. It's kind of funny how both Symphony of the Night and Super Metroid reward these playstyles in different ways. Super Metroid's endings get better and better as less time is spent playing, while Symphony of the Night's endings get better and better the more you explore the castle. Personally, I prefer the latter. Now before I tell you which game I prefer when comparing Super Metroid and Symphony of the Night, I wanted to thank my new patrons on Patreon. Thank you to my new low poly tier patrons, Angel, Nerd Taxi, and Dreamcaster, as well as returning patron Bjorn. If you want access to the models I make, including the Samus model in this video, consider becoming a low poly tier patron for $5. Or if you just want to support the channel, you can subscribe to my pre-rendered tier for only $1. Now, out of the 2 games I've played, Symphony of the Night and Super Metroid, which one do I prefer? Symphony of the Night. Now, I'll be honest, I don't really think this is a very fair comparison if we're considering all aspects of both games. I mean, Symphony of the Night was developed on a more powerful console capable of 3D and other visual effects, while Super Nintendo had, I don't know, Mode 7? Symphony of the Night is just a bigger game with a setting capable of greater variance in its presentation. Dracula's 18th century Gothic castle, Alucard describes as
a creature of chaos,
allows for a lot more variety in its areas, while a lot of Super Metroid's areas really only vary on what color the rocks are. I mostly kid, of course, both games look great, I just prefer Symphony of the Night's setting a bit more. I think one thing I did find a little frustrating design-wise with Super Metroid was blocking off previously discovered areas until you found an alternate route or unlocked a new weapon. I get this is probably put in place to keep players from doing a lot of unnecessary backtracking, but when the answer to a certain problem isn't as clear, you find yourself running back and forth between the few rooms you're able to access until you've bombed every corner, hit every button combination, or given up on figuring it out yourself and just finding a walkthrough. I can think of a few times this happened, one being the optional wall jump section of the game, and yeah, fuck the wall jump in Super Metroid. With all things considered, I do think Super Metroid is a bit smarter in its level design. While Symphony of the Night provides you with a Swiss Army knife of abilities, making every corner of the game accessible one way or another, I found myself finding less ways to cheese areas in Super Metroid. All in all, both games are great, and I can definitely find myself revisiting them both in the future. Well, that's pretty much all I have to say about Metroidvanias. Like I said earlier, I do plan on playing more from this genre, so please drop some recommendations down below. Also, let me know what you think of this style of video. I still plan on doing my normal low poly model projects on this channel. This was just some in-between content I thought would be fun. Thanks for watching.